and call the case. We have Street versus Taylor. Are the parties here and ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Do we have any housekeeping or pretrial matters that we need to take up?
Yes, Your Honor. May we first make appearances?
You may.
My name is Deeksha Kohli, appearing on behalf of the plaintiff, Jordan Street. I'd also like to introduce you to my co-counsel and second chair, Chandler Matz. Like I said earlier, you'll never see him on your screen because instead of logging into Zoom separately, he decided to control my computer from his computer. I'll admit I have no idea how he does that, but that's why he's my second chair.
We're all learning here on the fly. Defense?
Yes, good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Dylan Shalabro, and I, along with my co-counsel, Andrew Edge, are here on behalf of Coach Reese Taylor and are ready to proceed to housekeeping matters when the court is ready.
Very well. We'll take up the plaintiff's housekeeping matters first.
Yes, Your Honor. First, we note that certain exhibits have been pre-admitted in today's case. Given that, we ask for permission on behalf of both parties to display on screen any exhibit that has already been admitted.
That'll be fine. In regards to exhibits 16, 17, 18, 19, and 21, the pre-admitted ones.
Yes, Your Honor. We also have a second housekeeping matter. Because the parties will be displaying several exhibits on our screens, we want to encourage both Your Honor and any scoring judges to use something called side-by-side view. This will help everyone see the exhibits and the advocates at the same time. May I put up a brief PowerPoint to explain how this works?
Briefly.
Yes, Your Honor. So I've just shared my screen with you. For anyone using the default settings, this blank white PowerPoint is very large and my image is very small. This is going to make it hard to see attorneys, witnesses, and the exhibits when they're being shared. To fix this, we strongly encourage that all judges change their view to something called side-by-side mode. If you change the setting now, you'll never have to do it again because Zoom will just switch to this better view when a document's being shared, and it'll go away whenever it stops. It's really easy to change the setting, and I'll show you how to do it. On the top of your screen, if you click the arrow next to where it says View Options, I'll give everyone a brief moment to do that. Next, if you click on the last option listed in that drop-down menu called Side-by-Side Mode, and now this is the last step. Right now, you'll see that the blank screen is still very big compared to the advocates. But you can change that by clicking on the little gray marker that separates the shared screen with the video images. Just drag that to the center of your screen. And if you do that, the shared screen will take up half of your screen and the advocates will be on the other half. Your Honor, if there are any questions or if you'd like me to repeat a step, I can do that.
I think we're good, and I will leave it up to everyone else in the Zoom call on how they want to watch the proceedings today. Anything further from the plaintiff?
Nothing further for housekeeping matters, Your Honor, but once the defense addresses their housekeeping matters, we have one substantive motion.
Very well. Defense, do we have any housekeeping matters from your side of the case?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense does have a number of preliminary matters we'd like to take up with the court. First, I know we are in a virtual world, but may we have free leave of the courtroom so long as we stay within the camera?
Yes, you may.
Okay. May I assume that all sidebars are constructive for the purpose of this trial?
Yes.
May I assume all witnesses are pre-sworn?
They are.
Now, Your Honor, we invoke Rule 615 and ask that the witness Aubrey Saracen be removed until it's her time to testify.
Very well.
Your Honor, this is a bifurcated trial, so we would like the court to be on notice that we are only trying liability at this phase.
Yes, this is a bifurcated trial.
Your Honor, as your Honor knows, defense would just like to remind the court that exhibits 18 and 19 have been pre-admitted per your pretrial order section 3C. That is Spencer London's report and Mr. London's CV. We just want to put the court on notice that I will be referring to these items in closing argument rather than discussing the evidence at this time.
Okay. Those arguments, those exhibits are pre-admitted, yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. And that is it for defense's preliminary matters. We are ready to proceed to motions eliminated.
All right. We will take up the plaintiff's motion in limine first. One housekeeping matter from just the court. I will give you a time check after the plaintiff's case in chief and then after the defense case in chief closes as well before closing arguments. So that's when we'll check in about time. We are going to try to get through this without any breaks as we're on a pretty tight time schedule. So just so that both parties are aware in advance.
Thank you.
Sounds good, Your Honor.
All right, plaintiff, we'll hear your motions now.
We have one substantive motion, but first I'd like to give the court a brief factual background. Your Honor, this is a wrongful death action. In 2018, Rory Street was a high school senior at Waco High. Rory Street played varsity soccer for Waco High, and at soccer practice on September 7th, 2018, after running numerous drills, Rory Street collapsed on the field and died. The plaintiff intends to prove that it was the negligence of the defendant, the Rory Street soccer coach, Reese Taylor, that caused Rory Street to die. With that, the plaintiff moves to admit Exhibit 14, Rory Street's autopsy. Normally, we would call a medical examiner, but in this jurisdiction, we're limited to one witness. But fortunately, both parties have stipulated to the authentication of this document. So we offer Exhibit 14 now.
Any response from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense has no objection to the admissibility of Exhibit 14. However, we do want to put the court on notice that that examiner's report does not give a basis to the conclusion, only the conclusion itself.
Very well. So you have no objection to the exhibit being admitted?
No, Your Honor.
Then we'll admit Exhibit, it was 14 you said?
Yes, Your Honor.
Exhibit 14 is admitted. Anything else from the plaintiff?
And nothing from the plaintiff, Your Honor. We're ready to proceed with opening statements.
Very well. Defense, let's hear your motions.
Yes, Your Honor. As you heard, the plaintiff has filed this wrongful death lawsuit against Coach Riley because of the actions that took place, or the alleged actions that took place on the soccer field that day. But as Your Honor is going to learn throughout the course of this trial, Rory's death was not the cause of Coach Taylor's actions, but instead the cause of Rory's cocaine use. Our motion limit is in two parts whenever Your Honor is ready for the first.
Go ahead.
Our defense's first part of our motion limit addresses any mention of shade tents being used after the fact that Rory died. We anticipate that both the defendant, the coach, and Ms. Merriweather will testify to the fact that tents were put in place to offer shade to the athletes after Rory died. As such, that's a subsequent remedial measure, and as Your Honor knows, subsequent remedial measures under 407 are inadmissible to prove negligence.
Your Honor, we don't oppose that motion. We have no intent of offering this evidence.
Very well. This motion will be granted. Defense, let's hear your second motion.
Our second motion addresses any mention of a prior incident with Coach Taylor regarding her pushing a player to the ground. That evidence is inadmissible under 404 as improper character evidence, as it is only used for conformity purposes and has no non-conformity purpose in this trial, and is therefore also irrelevant.
Your Honor, again, oh, excuse me.
Response from the plaintiff.
Your Honor, we don't oppose that motion.
Very well, then. We will grant that motion as well.
That's
Anything
it.
further from
Thanks,
the
Your
defense?
Honor.
Then we will proceed to opening statements. Plaintiff, go ahead.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
She didn't stop until Rory Street was dead. It's a Friday afternoon in September, and Rory Street is struggling. Her soccer team is practicing on one field, but Rory's running laps on another. She made a few mistakes at practice, and this is punishment. Sprint 90 feet one way, crawl 180 feet back. Over and over again in 103-degree weather. Rory's been out here for more than an hour. She doesn't know how much more she can take. Finally, her coach, the defendant, calls her back to the soccer field. Rory thinks her punishment is over. But she has no idea. The defendant came up with a second punishment. She told the team, Rory's going to dribble the ball and you guys are going to take turns tackling her. The defendant blows her whistle and Rory starts dribbling. The first player knocks Rory to the ground. But Rory gets back up. The defendant blows her whistle again. Another player takes Rory down. Rory wobbles to her feet, hands on her hips. The defendant blows her whistle. 15 times Rory tries to dribble that ball. 15 times this teenager who has been running nonstop in the summer heat is knocked to the ground. 15 times the defendant blows her whistle. But there was no 16th time. Because after 15, Rory couldn't get back up. Her body starts to tremble, then shake, then convulse. Her arms and legs are flailing. Her head bounces on the turf. Until suddenly, it stops. Someone tries to call an ambulance, but it's too late. The evidence will show that the defendant didn't stop when she saw Rory Street was struggling. She didn't stop when she saw Rory couldn't stand on her own feet. The evidence will show that the defendant didn't stop until Rory Street was dead. Rory was 18 years old. She liked watching TV. She liked spending time with her friends. She liked T-Bone's barbecue. Today, Rory's mother is suing the defendant, Coach Reese Taylor, for her wrongful death. And as the plaintiff, we have the burden of proving it's more likely than not that the defendant's negligence caused Rory to die. And we'll meet that burden with 3 simple facts. First, the defendant put every kid at risk. Second, the defendant put Rory Street in danger. And third, the defendant ignored the warning signs. Let's take those one at a time. Fact number 1. The defendant used extreme disciplinary methods that put every child at risk. The defendant's a soccer coach. She doesn't coach professionals. She coaches high school students, teenagers. Today, you'll learn that there are rules for high school soccer coaches. Rules to ensure that the coaches don't push their players too far. And one of these rules requires that when the temperatures reach 3 digits, coaches must provide water breaks every 15 minutes. September 7th, 2018, it was 103 degrees. Practice lasted more than an hour. The evidence will show that the defendant was required to give her team at least 5 breaks. You won't hear that she gave 1. But the evidence will show that the defendant wasn't just running practice without water. She was using punishment without water. Sprint 180 feet one way, crawl on all 4s back. She called it Burma Road. Now the defendant's going to say, well, this is tradition. We've been using this method for decades and no one's ever gotten hurt. But you won't hear of another coach at this high school or any other that has ever used this method in 103-degree heat. Which brings me to point number 2. While the defendant put every child at risk, she put Rory Street in danger. Because that afternoon, the defendant created a new form of discipline, a tackling line. Every player got in a line and took turns slide tackling Rory. That's when a player slides on the grass, cleats first, to try to take the ball away from their opponent, even if it means knocking out their legs and taking them to the ground. It's all a part of the game. But you'll learn today that it has never been used as punishment until September 7th, 2018. When Rory Street was already exhausted, 15 teammates, one after the other, knocked her to the ground. Point number 3. The defendant ignored the warning signs. Today, one of Rory's teammates is going to take the stand. Aubrey Saracen will testify it was obvious that Rory Street was struggling. She'll testify that when the defendant created the tackling line, Rory's face was pale. Her hands were on her hips and she was struggling to breathe. And when the other players knocked Rory to the floor, she struggled to get back up. In fact, you'll learn today that eventually, when Rory couldn't get up, the defendant walked over to her, yanked her up by her jersey, just to have her knocked down again. Within minutes, Rory Street was dead of heat stroke. Now, I want to be upfront about what happened when Rory's body was taken to the coroner's office. They found a small amount of cocaine in her system. And it's true. Cocaine can contribute to heat stroke. But you will hear expert testimony that the symptoms of a heat stroke involving cocaine are the same as the symptoms of any other heat stroke. When the defendant saw those symptoms, she should have called for help. Instead, she called for more discipline. Now, we acknowledge a good coach pushes their players to be the best. But the evidence will show that this coach pushed Rory Street too far. The evidence will show she didn't let Rory stop for a water break. She didn't let Rory stop when she was struggling. She didn't let Rory stop when she couldn't stand on her own. At the end of this trial, we'll ask you to find the defendant liable because she didn't stop until Rory Street was dead. Thank you.
Defense opening statement.
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court. I cannot imagine what it's like to lose a child. My heart goes out to Jordan Street for the loss of hers. Your Honor, it's normal in cases like this to try to find somewhere to place the blame. And that's often because the truth can be painfully hard to accept. And the hard truth in this case is that Rory Street was using cocaine. It was Rory Street's cocaine use that caused her death, not Coach Taylor. Now, unfortunately, because of the pandemic, Coach Taylor can't be with me here today, but you will see her on the screen. And I'd like to introduce her for a second if I can. Coach Taylor has been in Waco basically all her life. She's been coaching for 20 some odd years, coaching soccer, basketball, tennis, track, you name it, she's coached it. And she's been coaching ladies soccer at Waco High for the past 6 years. Now we admit, Coach Taylor, she's a tough coach. She has high expectations. She demands discipline. She demands hard work. She demands that the player put the team above oneself. Coach Taylor also treats her players like her own child. She holds them to the same expectations that she would hold her own kid. You're going to learn that because they're all on the same team. So when one of the players deviates from what Coach Taylor expects, from the discipline, from the hard work, from the attention to the team, when it seems like the player is goofing off or not being attentive, Coach Taylor does what every coach at Waco has done for the past 35 years. She sends him to Burma Road. You're going to learn Coach Taylor did not create Burma Road. Burma Road's been there long before Coach Taylor ever got there. It's a tradition at Waco High. When someone's goofing off or not paying attention to practice, they get sent to Burma Road. They have to sprint 30 yards, dribble the ball 30 yards, then score. Then they have to bear crawl 60 yards back and do it again until the coach says that's enough. Which leads us to September 7th, 2018. It's normal practice. Practice was at the normal time, 3:15 p.m. At this practice, Coach Taylor's star player was not acting the same. Rory was missing passes she wouldn't normally miss. Rory wasn't catching passes. Rory was missing wide open goals. Coach perceived that Rory was goofing off, so she said, I need to get Rory's attention. Go to Burma Road. Coach could see Rory at Burma Road. And at that time, you're going to hear that Coach didn't see any signs that Rory was struggling, didn't see any signs that Rory was faltering. Rory did not bring anything to the coach or the trainer's attention that would lead anyone to think anything but she's just running her routes. But Coach perceived that she was goofing off again and not taking it seriously, so she called her back. She said, I need to find a new way to get Rory's attention. So she said, let's do some slide tackle drills. Now, Your Honor, slide tackles are not the medieval practice the plaintiff wants you to believe that they are. Slide tackles are a normal part of soccer. If you turn on any TV screen with a soccer game on the weekend, you're going to see people doing that. It's a defensive move. It's how players run and they slide in, take the ball from the offensive player so that their team can be back on offense. It's a normal part of the game. That's why the Texas High School Soccer Coaching Association teaches coaches how to do these drills. is to teach their players how to avoid getting hurt in these situations that they are likely to come into every single game, every single practice. Now, Your Honor, Coach Taylor had Rory doing these drills about 15 times. But during those times, you're going to hear Jess Merriweather, who's the trainer. You're going to hear from Coach Taylor. And neither one of them during those drills nor at Burma Road saw anything to lead them to believe that Rory needed medical attention. That's because nobody knew that Rory had used cocaine before practice. Now, the plaintiff has brought this lawsuit in this case, and it's the plaintiff's burden to prove to you that not only did Coach Taylor fail to exercise ordinary care, but that Coach Taylor was the proximate cause, or Coach Taylor's conduct was the proximate cause of Rory's death. And the plaintiff is going to fail to meet that burden because they cannot show that Coach Taylor failed to exercise ordinary care. As I mentioned a second ago, you're going to hear by deposition from Jess Merriweather. Jess Merriweather was the head athletic trainer at Waco High School. Jess Merriweather is going to testify in that deposition that anytime Coach Taylor perceived that one of her athletes or students was at a risk for medical harm, she would send them immediately to Jess to get evaluation. Jess Merriweather is also going to testify that she was at that practice that day on September 7th, 2018. She's going to testify that even though she was tending to other athletes that day, she could see Rory at Burma Road, and she could see her during the slide tackle drills. And at no point during either drill did she see anything from Rory that gave her concern. And Ms. Merriweather is also going to testify to the fact that anytime a player wanted water, regardless if they were on break or not, all they had to do was request it. But the plaintiff's also going to fail to prove that Coach Taylor was the proximate cause of Rory Street's death. And to prove that they had to show that an ordinary person would be able to foresee that Rory Street would die doing something she did every single day in practice. Have to foresee, expect, even guess that Coach Taylor could anticipate that Rory Street was going to use cocaine before practice. The plaintiff will fail to prove that Coach Taylor was the proximate cause of Rory Street's death. Further, Your Honor, we have asserted an affirmative defense of comparative negligence. And as Your Honor knows, that's our burden of proof today. And help us meet that burden, we furnished the report of Spencer London, who is a toxicologist, has had experience in over 200 cases, has testified in 50. And Mr. London's going to talk about the cocaine that was in Rory's system in that report. He's going to testify that cocaine can lead to heart attack, can lead to cardiac arrhythmia, can lead to cerebral hemorrhage, can lead to stroke, or even heart failure. Mr. London's going to testify in that report to a reasonable degree of medical certainty that Rory's death was at least in part caused by the cocaine in her body on that day. Your Honor, the truth can be painfully hard to accept in situations like this. But the hard truth in this case is that Rory Street was using cocaine that day. And it was the cocaine that caused her death, not Coach Taylor. Thank you.
Okay, plaintiff, you can call your first witness.
Your Honor, before we call our first witness, we want to draw everyone's attention to their screens. Now would be a good time to switch from speaker view to gallery view, and that button's in the right-hand corner of your Zoom. Your Honor, now the plaintiff calls Aubrey Saracen.
Saracen, you've been sworn.
Your Honor, may I proceed?
You may.
Good morning, Ms. Saracen. Can you see and hear me clearly?
Hi, good morning. Yes, I can.
Please introduce yourself.
My My name's Audrey Saracen. I am a 19-year-old freshman at Rice.
Sorry, what school do you go to?
I go to Rice University.
Did you know Rory Street?
I used to know Rory.
How did you know Rory?
Well, Rory used to play soccer with me in high school.
You said that you used to know Rory. Is Rory still alive?
No, unfortunately, Rory passed away back in September of 2018.
Where did Rory die, if you know?
Well, I do know because it happened right in front of me, but Rory died on the soccer field.
I want to give the court an idea of what Rory was like. How long did you know her?
I knew Rory my whole life.
Miss Saracen, could you open up a document in your exhibit notebook that's marked as Exhibit 3? And
Yes.
let me know when you have it in front of you.
Okay, I got it.
Do you recognize Exhibit 3?
Yeah, absolutely. That's Rory.
Does Exhibit 3 fairly depict how Rory looked on September 7th, 2018?
Yeah. Well, not on that date, but normally that's what Rory looked like. But yeah, that's what she looked like at the time.
Your Honor, plaintiff offers Exhibit 3 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Exhibit 3 will be admitted.
And may we display Exhibit 3 on the screen?
You may.
So, Miss Saracen, you said that you and Rory played soccer together. How good of a soccer player was she?
She was excellent. I mean, she was the best player on our team at the time. She even planned on playing in a D1 college for soccer.
So let's talk about the defendant in today's case. Do you know Reese Taylor?
I do.
How do you know the defendant?
Well, Coach Taylor was our coach at the time that Rory passed away.
I want to be upfront about your relationship with the defendant. While the defendant was your coach, what was your role on the team?
I was a player on the team at the time.
Were you a starter, a second string?
I was originally a starter midfielder. At some point, coach's daughter ended up taking over first string.
So at the time, how did you feel about losing the first string position?
I mean, it was a bummer, but it's something that happens in sports, so it wasn't the end of the world.
Now, you said that it was a bummer for you at the time. How long ago was that?
Well, this happened in 2018, so 2 years.
So let's talk about the conditions on the day that Rory died. Did you see Rory that day?
I did. We were playing on the field together.
Was this practice?
It was during a practice in September after school.
And was this an indoor or outdoor field?
It was an outdoor field, just a standard grass soccer field, no trees on it or anything.
Miss Saracen, could you open up what's been marked as Exhibit 9 in your notebook?
Yes. Okay, got it.
What is Exhibit 9?
That's a picture of our soccer field from behind the goalpost.
Is this how the soccer field looked on September 7th, 2018?
Yep, that's exactly what it looked like.
Your Honor, plaintiff offers Exhibit 9 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Exhibit 9 will be admitted.
And may we display Exhibit 9?
You may.
So, Miss Saracen, who decides when practice gets scheduled?
Coach Taylor.
On the day Rory died, what time did the defendant schedule practice?
It was around 3 to 4 in the afternoon.
Does 3:30 sound about right?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
How hot was it?
It was scorching. Definitely well over 100 degrees.
During practice, are there any water breaks?
There sometimes are. I don't remember on that specific day.
So who decides when the team gets a water break?
Coach Taylor.
On September 7th, 2018, how many water breaks do you remember the defendant giving the team?
I don't remember whether or not I had a water break on that day.
So let's talk about what the defendant had Rory doing at practice on that day. Could you open up Exhibit 2 and let me know when you have it in front of you?
Got it?
Do you recognize Exhibit 2?
I do. It's an aerial overview of the soccer field.
Is Exhibit 2 a fair and accurate depiction of the field where practice was held on September 7th, 2018?
Yes.
Your Honor, plaintiff offers Exhibit 2.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Exhibit 2 is admitted, and you may show it to the jury.
Thank you, Your Honor. So Ms. Saracen, what's the blue box?
So the blue box is what we call the soccer field. It's where we do all of our drills for the most part and where we do our scrimmages and stuff like that.
And what's the red box?
So that is where we would do the Burma Road drill specifically.
What's the Burma Road drill?
It's an exercise that Coach Taylor had us do. So in that red square, you would dribble the ball for 30 yards, and then you'd have to sprint as hard as you could for 30 yards, and then bear crawl on your hands and your knees all the way back to the starting point.
So who decides when the players get sent to Burma Road?
Coach Taylor.
And when a player gets sent to Burma Road, who decides when they get to leave?
Coach Taylor.
On September 7th, 2018, how many players, to the best of your knowledge, were sent to Burma Road?
Just two of us.
Who was the first?
It was me.
And who was the second?
It was Rory.
Did you ever hear the defendant say why he sent Rory to Burma Road?
Yes. I heard the coach say to Rory, "You're useless on the field. You might as well run until you pass out."
How close were you to Rory while she was running and crawling on Burma Road?
I was close. I mean, we were both within that red square that you saw, so we were very close to each other.
How did Rory look to you while she was running and crawling on Burma Road?
In her face, she looked really pale, just didn't look well.
Is that how Rory usually looked during soccer practice?
No, I mean, Rory was an excellent athlete, and that was an unusual look for her to have.
So let's talk about how Rory died. Did Rory end practice on Burma Road?
No.
Where did Rory go next?
Well, Coach Taylor called Rory back over to the soccer field area to do another drill.
How close were you to the soccer field?
I was close, give or take 20 yards maybe.
How well could you see?
Oh, clearly. I mean, there's nothing on the field except for grass, so nothing obstructing my view.
So tell us, what happened when the defendant had Rory come back to the soccer field?
Well, all of the players started lining up, and so all the players were lined up, and then Rory, they were facing each other.
How did Rory look?
A little bit worse than she had on Burma Road. She was still really pale, out of breath.
After the players lined up, what did they do?
So when they were lined up, one by one, they did something that's called, sliding tackling drill.
What exactly is a slide tackle?
So in soccer, it's where you have one person with the ball and someone else tries to come in and slide tackle to get the ball out from under them. So they're just sliding and tackling the other person.
So when that first player slide tackled Rory, what did she do?
She got back up and got ready for the next person to tackle her.
Did you see how many times Rory was slide tackled?
15 in a row.
How many times did Rory get knocked down?
15 every single time.
What happened after the 15th time Rory got knocked down?
Rory didn't get back up.
Can you describe what Rory's body looked like after she was knocked down that 15th time?
Yeah. She was just laying there like she'd been knocked down the other times, and then her body started convulsing and shaking, and then after doing that for a bit, she just laid there lifeless.
Miss Saracen, did you ever see Rory get up?
No.
Now, we've talked about the last moments of Rory's life, but I want to focus on what the defendant was doing. Before the players began tackling Rory, did you hear the defendant give any instructions?
I believe Coach Taylor said every time I blow my whistle, someone is going to slide tackle Rory.
How many times had you seen the defendant use this drill in practice before September 7th?
Never. This was the first time that we had ever done a drill like this.
When Rory got knocked down, did you ever see the defendant approach her?
Yes.
What did the defendant do when she approached Rory?
She would pick her up by the back of her jersey and yank her back up onto her feet and put her in position to get tackled again.
What did the defendant do after she yanked Rory up by her jersey?
She would just make her stand there and then blow the whistle as a code for someone else to go ahead and tackle Rory.
Now, you said that the defendant told everyone to tackle Rory when she blew her whistle. How many times did the defendant blow her whistle?
15 times.
When did the defendant stop blowing the whistle?
After the 15th time, when Rory didn't get up and started convulsing and then died.
Pass the witness.
Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Saracen, I'm going to ask you some questions about Rory Street. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's all right.
All right. Now, you said you and Miss Street were really good friends.
Yes,
Y'all grew up together.
we did.
Grew up playing soccer together.
Yes,
Hang out at each other's houses.
yes,
Athletically, you admired Rory.
I did.
Said she was one of the best players you'd ever seen.
She was.
Now, you and Rory, y'all both played for Coach Taylor. Is that right?
That's right.
And you played for Coach Taylor the whole time you were at Waco High School.
Yes, that's right.
But I want to talk about Coach Taylor in a little bit more detail. You believe you're smarter than Coach.
I don't recall. It depends on what context.
Ms. Harrison, you've given a deposition in this case.
I have.
You've testified previously that you think you and a bunch of your teammates are much smarter than Coach.
Yes, I believe that's true.
You don't believe Coach was a good player back in his day, or her day, excuse me.
Yes.
In reality, you're pretty upset with Coach.
Yes, because of what happened with Rory.
I'm talking about being replaced by his daughter as a starter.
I was bummed out. Like I said, I wasn't the end of the world.
Ms. Harrison, you said being replaced was all crap.
Yeah, it was.
You said that the difference between you and his daughter was not even a question.
That is true.
Yes. You were upset by that decision.
Yeah, I was upset. I was bummed out.
You do not like Coach Taylor.
Definitely not now. No.
Now let's look at some of your complaints about Coach Taylor. You told us that she yelled at Rory on September 7th, 2018.
She did a lot.
But you said before that you're used to Coach yelling at players.
Yeah, she tends to get pretty angry.
Wasn't anything different.
She was angry that day.
Well, you said she was just coach being coach.
Yeah.
You say you usually just shrug that stuff off.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, you also told us it was hot that day.
Yes, it was very hot.
But that's not abnormal for Waco, Texas.
No, it's not. It was very hot that day too.
Soccer season for a high school athlete is typically August and September every summer.
Yes.
In Texas.
Yes.
It can be hot.
It can.
Practice is normally at 3:15 p.m.
Right.
That wasn't anything new.
No.
And y'all would get out there once school was over. Is that right? That's when you start practice?
Yes, around 3:30.
And you've said yourself there were always water bottles out there for you guys.
Yes.
Okay. And the players could run and grab a drink during any break of practice.
Yes, if Coach Taylor let us.
Well, you said Coach Taylor usually at least gave you one break during the practice.
Yeah, from what I remember.
Typically always in the middle.
Yes.
I also want to talk about some things you've said about slide tackling. You said slide tackling at practice was a first, but you've played soccer for a long time. Is that right?
Yes, I have.
Slide tackling is a part of the game.
It is. Yes.
It's a defensive move.
Yeah, it can be.
As a midfielder, you've utilized it before.
Yeah, I have done it before.
So slide tackles aren't something new to you.
Yeah, the tackling wasn't different. It was just the way in which the exercise was done.
So I'm going to redirect you back to my question. Slide tackling was nothing different for any of the players on that team.
Nope.
Now, the purpose of slide tackling, like I said, is to get the ball away.
Yes.
And you've said before that slide tackles usually are not dangerous.
No, they can just cause physical contact, and that's where it can get dangerous.
So you'd agree with me that it's important to practice avoiding getting out of the way during a slide tackle?
Sorry, I didn't hear your question.
So you'd agree with me that it is important to learn how to get out of the way of a slide tackle?
Yes, it can be, just depending on what you're trying to do.
Well, if you don't want to get taken out, it's important to learn how to get out of the way.
Yeah.
Now, you also talked about Miss Street joining you at Burma Road on September 7th, 2018. You said Rory seemed to be struggling while running.
Yes, she did. She was just a little not herself at the time.
Yeah, you said she was pale.
Yeah, she was pale.
Said she was complaining of her chest hurting.
Yes.
As you just said, she didn't seem herself.
Right.
Miss Saracen, you didn't tell Miss Street to stop running, did you?
No, I'm not the coach.
Well, you didn't. As her friend, you didn't tell her to go home.
No.
As her friend, you didn't tell her to talk to the trainer.
No, I don't think I did.
You yourself did not say anything to coach about, hey, Rory's looking pale.
No, and I regret that.
You didn't say anything to coach about Rory struggling.
No.
You didn't say anything to coach about Rory's chest hurting.
No, I don't think I did.
You didn't say all three of those things. You didn't mention that to the trainer either.
That's right.
Now, if I remember right, you texted a friend and said that on the day of the practice, Rory had just collapsed out of nowhere.
I think that sounds right.
I just want to make sure that we have your understanding of what that means proper in our heads. To you, unexpected means you weren't, that's what it says, you didn't expect it.
Right. I just meant that you don't expect healthy high schoolers to just drop dead.
Right, that was a surprise.
Yes, it was a terrible surprise.
Rory passing out was a surprise.
Yes.
Miss Saracen, Miss Street was using drugs, wasn't she?
I don't know.
You'd agree with me that before September 7th, 2018, Rory was stressed all the time.
Your Honor, objection speculation. This witness cannot testify to another person's state of mind being stressed.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. Miss Saracen and Miss Rory Street were best friends. They spent every night together, they hung out all the time. It goes to a present sense impression of what Rory was going through at that time.
Your Honor, if I may, there's no foundation to be laid that this was a present sense impression. Opposing counsel hasn't laid any foundation that on a specific occasion, this witness saw Rory Street acting stressed in any way. We don't have enough foundation for that.
Your Honor, I laid the foundation as their friends and the amount of time they spent together in the days leading up to September 7th, 2018. I don't have to lay foundation as to what was said. I just have to lay foundation as to why it would be said to one another.
I'm going to sustain the objection.
Ms. Saracen, as Rory's friend, you would agree with me that her parents put a lot of pressure on her.
Yeah, I think so.
You would agree that there was pressure to get a scholarship since she was such a great athlete.
Yes, she wanted to go on to play D1 soccer.
And that can be a heavy burden on someone's shoulders when they're trying to make it to the next level.
It can be, but if anyone could do it, Rory could.
You're aware Rory had cocaine in her system when she died, right?
I don't know if I'm aware of that.
Pass the witness at this time, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor. May Ms. Saracen be excused?
You can step down, Ms. Saracen. Plaintiff, call your next witness.
Your Honor, Ms. Saracen is our only witness. However, before we rest our case in chief, we'd like to read a certain portion of testimony from Exhibit 16. That's the expert report from Dr. McConaughey into the record. Per Your Honor's pretrial order, this exhibit has already been entered into evidence.
Correct. Proceed.
May we display the portions of the report as we read them?
You may.
Based on all of the above, it is my opinion, within a reasonable degree of medical certainty, that Rory Street died as a result of heat exhaustion and/or a heat stroke on September 8th, 2018. It is also my opinion, within a reasonable degree of medical certainty, that Rory Street's death was not a result of cocaine use. With that, Your Honor, the plaintiff rests.
All right. Defense?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense raises their mid-trial motion of a Rule 50 judgment as a matter of law. Viewing the evidence in the light most favorable to the non-moving party, the plaintiff, any reasonable juror would conclude that the plaintiff has failed to meet their burden in this case. We have heard no evidence to suggest that Coach Taylor could foresee that Rory Street would die as a result of these drills and that Rory Street would come to practice under the influence of cocaine.
Response?
Your Honor, defendant's Rule 50 motion should be denied because Rule 50 only applies in jury trials, and this is a bench trial. But even if the defense brought their motion under Rule 52C, which applies in bench trials, it should still be denied. Under Rule 52C, a court should only enter a judgment if it has already made a factual finding against the plaintiff on a dispositive issue. Here, the plaintiff has met its burden of proof on each element. First, we have to prove negligence. Your Honor, today we heard that Rory Street was practicing in 103-degree weather. running, crawling, dribbling, tackling, all in 103-degree weather. You heard testimony that the practice was running for more than an hour before Rory died, but you heard no evidence that there was even a single water break. That's enough to meet our burden of negligence to show that the defendant did not act with ordinary care. But we also have to prove causation, which has two components. First is actual cause, commonly called but-for cause. Rory wouldn't have died of heat stroke if the defendant didn't hold the practice in 103-degree heat. And the second component is proximate cause, whether the injury was foreseeable. And if you subject a teenager to running and crawling and being tackled in grueling heat with no breaks, no water, nothing, it's foreseeable that they get a heat stroke. And if you have that same player tackled 15 times, knocked to the floor over and over, and you don't stop until she's dead, it's foreseeable. And for those reasons, the defense's motion should be denied.
I'm going to deny the defense's motion. If y'all will give me about 30 seconds to do some quick math, I will give you a time check, and then we will proceed with the defense case in chief. All right, are both parties back? There we are. I have the plaintiff with 28:05 remaining and the defense with 38:27 remaining. Vince, are you ready for your case in chief?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense would like to start by calling Coach Reese Taylor to the stand.
I'm unmuted.
I think so.
I'm sorry, they're bringing us lunch. Hold on, just 1 second.
Sorry.
And they delivered to Dallas.
All right. You ready, Coach Taylor?
Yes, ma'am, Your Honor.
You can proceed with your direct when you're ready.
Please introduce yourself to us.
My name is Reese Taylor.
Is it all right if I call you Coach?
Yes, sir.
Coach Taylor, where are you from?
I'm from Waco.
All right. Did you go to school here in Waco?
Yes, sir, I went to Waco High.
What do you do now?
I'm a coach at Waco High now.
What do you coach?
Right now I coach soccer in the varsity level.
How long have you been a coach generally?
About 26 years. Yeah, about 26 years.
Tell us about all the things you've coached.
Basketball, volleyball, track, softball. Pretty much if it's played, I've taught it.
What about soccer? How long have you been coaching soccer?
Time gets away from you after a while, but it's been at least 20 seasons.
Now, what about at Waco High? How long have you been coaching soccer at Waco High?
6 years.
Now, how has Waco High soccer team been doing now that you're the coach?
It's been doing really good. 5 of the 6 years we won district, and 1 year we even made it to the finals or semifinals.
Do you have any? Now, let me ask you this, Coach Taylor. As an accomplished coach, I know as lawyers we have continued legal training. Do coaches receive any kind of continued coaching training?
Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is testifying as to the legal training that lawyers receive.
Thoughts?
I don't see the relevance of the objection.
Overruled.
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Yes, Coach Taylor. I know lawyers, we get continued legal education. Do coaches get any kind of continued coaching education as they progress through the ranks?
Okay. Well, to keep your coaching job, you don't really have to have it, but I go to several coaching clinics a year.
Why do you do that?
To keep up to date. I want to keep up to date with sports is one of those things that as time goes on, we find better ways to do things. And I just want to stay up to date so I can teach my kids how to do things the best way possible.
Now, let me ask you, in those seminars that you attend and the trainings that you attend, have you ever been taught about slide tackling?
Yes, sir.
Okay, tell me about that.
Slide tackle it's a usual thing that happens in soccer. It's a maneuver where the other side is trying to get the ball from you.
And who teaches those clinics on slide tackling?
The Texas, I'm not completely sure. I don't remember what it's.
I told you it was the Texas High School Coaching Association. Would that sound right?
Yes, sir, it does.
Now, what do they teach you about slide tackling? Why is it important?
They teach you that it's important to practice it with your team because you want to keep your team safe.
Now, what about practicing in the heat? Do they teach you anything about that?
Yes, sir.
Tell me a little bit about what they teach.
They teach, there's recommendations on how often you take breaks, and depending on how hot it is, the times you take breaks increases.
Now, Coach Taylor, we know that you live in Waco, Texas, and that's where your school is. What time do you normally practice during the day?
Around 3.
Okay, now is it hot at 3?
Absolutely.
Is it hot in Texas, period?
Yes, sir.
Why do you choose 3 o'clock?
It's conditioning.
Tell me, why is conditioning important? And what is it?
Conditioning is, sports are very physical, as I guess you can guess. Conditioning is important so that our players are in top shape and they don't struggle in actual games.
So tell me why conditioning was important for your particular players at 3 p.m.
Because Texas is hot and we never know when we're going to play games in soccer. It could be at the hottest time of the day or it could be at night. We don't know. I want my team to be safe and to be able to play whenever they have to.
You said you wanted your team to be safe. How do you view your players?
They're my kids.
So why is it important for you to condition them and get them ready?
Other than to keep them safe, and I want them to be performing at their peak.
I'd like to talk about a couple of players that you'd like to be performing at their peak. Do you remember an Aubrey Saracen?
Yes, sir.
Was she one of your players?
Yes, sir.
All right, tell me about your relationship with Aubrey.
Aubrey had some disciplinary issues. She was on the varsity, or she was a starter on the varsity team, and she had that position taken from her. And I think that she held a grudge for that, but this isn't really a popularity contest, so I didn't care. I just wanted, I did care, but I wanted the best for the team.
You said she lost her position. Who did she lose her position to?
She lost her position to my daughter.
Now, did she lose her position to your daughter because she's your daughter?
No, sir.
Why did she lose her position?
My daughter performed better than her.
Was Rory Street also one of your players?
Yes, sir.
Was Rory a starter?
She was, yes.
Coach Taylor, tell me about your relationship with Rory.
I thought we had a healthy coach-student relationship. She was like a superhuman athlete. I had a lot of respect for her. She performed fantastically. She was one of my star players.
So tell me, in contrast, how was she performing on September 7th, 2018? She seemed distracted. She was goofing off and didn't seem focused. How was her play compared to her normal level of play?
She was missing easy passes and just seemed like she was goofing off.
Now, while you were observing Rory not playing to her normal par, where were you?
I was on the sidelines about 20, 30 yards away.
Now, how did Rory handle your criticisms of her performance?
Normally, she handled them fine. She was, but that day, she wasn't accepting any criticism at all.
So what did you do then?
I had her run Burma Road.
Coach Taylor, what is Burma Road?
It's a tradition at Waco High. It's used as a disciplinary technique. What it is you sprint 30 yards and then you dribble a ball for another 30 yards and then make a pass or try to make a goal. If you miss any of them, you go back to the start and you keep on doing that until the coach tells you to stop.
So tell me, what high school did you play soccer at?
Waco High.
Was Burma Road a thing when you played?
Yes, sir. Before I played even.
Now, Coach, I'm sorry I got to ask you this, but how long ago was that?
Well, about 30, 35 years ago.
So Burma Road's been around for about 35 years.
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, how was Rory, how was she running Burma Road? Did she seem like she was struggling?
No more than usual. She did seem like she was distracted still.
Did she look like she was physically incapable of running?
No, I was looking at her. She didn't seem to be sweating any more than any of the other players. She seemed fine physically.
At any point while Rory was at Burma Road, did she say anything to you about not being well?
No, sir.
Okay. So what did you do when you said Rory still seemed like she was distracted?
I wanted to get her attention, so I had her do a slide tackle drill.
Okay, now tell us what a slide tackle is in your experience as a coach.
A slide tackle is it's a technique that's usually used in soccer to take the ball from an opposing team.
Is this a drill you've done before?
The drill specifically, no, I hadn't done it, but we have practiced slide tackles before. You have to.
Does the Texas High School Soccer Coaches Association say that you should probably be teaching your players about slide tackles?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, how many times had you had Rory slide tackled?
It was about 14 or 15 times.
Coach Taylor, this is an important question. Were you angry when you were having her slide tackle?
No, sir.
Are slide tackles a part of soccer?
They are.
During this drill, how did Rory appear?
She appeared normal. She was sweating. She was struggling a little bit, but nothing that seemed out of the ordinary.
Now, I want to talk about when players struggle. Do you guys have any kind of trainer on the field with you to ensure player safety?
Absolutely. Miss Merriweather was with me that day, and she always is.
Tell me about Miss Merriweather.
She is our trainer. Just because it's important to have a trainer out there every time we practice, we have her out there with us. She's an extra set of eyes to watch my kids. And if any of them give me a complaint that they're not feeling right, I send them straight to her.
Would it be irresponsible not to have her out there?
Absolutely.
Why?
Somebody could get injured. I'm a coach and she's a trainer. We have different specialties. She knows their bodies better.
Does she help keep a lookout on the players during practice?
Yes, sir.
Do you know if she was watching Rory that day?
I know she was watching everyone.
Did Miss Merriweather say anything to you about Rory after she died?
Yes, we talked about it. It was that kind of thing just doesn't happen. So yeah.
Coach Taylor, did Miss Merriweather mention anything to you about seeing Rory appear like this was going to happen?
No.
Did Miss Merriweather say that Rory had approached her and said that she was struggling?
No.
Could Miss Merriweather, based on your conversation, could she tell that Rory was struggling?
No.
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation and hearsay.
Response?
Your Honor, I wasn't eliciting a statement. I was just eliciting a yes or no, whether or not she told her anything at all.
Your Honor, I believe the question was based on your conversation, did Merriweather know that this was going to happen? Or did Merriweather know that Rory was struggling? There's no way this witness could know what somebody else thought about Rory.
Your Honor, my question was, did Miss Merriweather tell you that she knew Rory was struggling? That's just a yes or a no.
The witness can answer yes or no, but feel free to raise the objection again if needed.
No.
What did Miss Merriweather say about Rory that day?
Your Honor, hearsay. This question calls for hearsay.
Response?
Your Honor, it goes to Miss Merriweather's then existing state of mind and her present sense impression being there on the field at the time Rory died.
Sustained.
Coach Taylor, was this side slide tackle and drill something meant to punish Rory?
No.
Was this your first time doing this drill?
Yes.
Ms. Taylor, I know this is going to be a difficult question for me to ask, but do you take any responsibility in Rory's death?
No, I don't.
Why not?
We didn't do anything out of the ordinary that day. It was a hot day, but we offered water. I had Miss Merriweather out there with me, and we were watching our kids.
Coach Taylor, did you have any reason to suspect that Rory might be using drugs like cocaine?
No, sir.
Ask the witness, Your Honor.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor.
You can proceed when ready.
Good afternoon, Coach Taylor.
Good afternoon.
Can you see and hear me all right?
Yes, ma'am.
How are you doing today?
Doing okay, thank you.
I want to talk to you about priorities. You're proud of your soccer coaching record, right?
Yes, ma'am.
You've won your district.
Yes, ma'am.
You've won your region.
Yes, ma'am.
But you've never won the state championship, right?
No, ma'am.
And you would like to win the state championship.
Absolutely.
Now, Rory Street was one of the best players you've ever coached, correct?
She was.
In 2018 was your last chance to win that championship with Rory on the team.
Yes, ma'am.
But you'd agree that a coach should never put winning above safety, right?
Absolutely.
And you coach high school students,
Yes, ma'am.
teenagers.
Yes, ma'am.
As a high school soccer coach, you'd agree safety should always come first.
Yes, ma'am.
So let's talk about safety standards. In June 2018, you attended a meeting by the Texas High School Soccer Coach Association, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And this is the same meeting you discussed on direct examination, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, Ms. Taylor, do you have an exhibit notebook in front of you?
Yes, ma'am.
Could you open up Exhibit 11 and just let me know when you have that in front of you?
I have it in front of me now.
Exhibit 11 is the PowerPoint slides from that meeting that we were discussing, right?
Yes, ma'am.
It's a fair and accurate copy of those slides.
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, plaintiff offers Exhibit 11.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor, hearsay.
Your Honor, may be heard.
You may.
We're not using these slides for the truth of the matter asserted. Rather, it goes directly to the defendant's knowledge of these guidelines set forth by the association.
Any response to that?
Yes, Your Honor, if opposing counsel only seeks to see if Coach Taylor knew about it, she can just ask, did you know about them? But the report itself is hearsay.
Your Honor, that's not the standard for hearsay. We're able to admit this PowerPoint presentation as long as it's not being offered for the truth of the matter.
Your objection's overruled. What exhibit is it?
11, Your Honor.
Exhibit 11 will be admitted.
And may we display Exhibit 11 on the screen?
You may.
Now, I want to compare what the Texas High School Association told you in June to how you conducted your practice in September. Now, you mentioned on direct examination that you thought of these as recommendations, right?
Yes, ma'am.
But here it says that when the temperatures exceed 100 degrees, coaches must give their players breaks.
It does say that.
Coaches must give their players breaks every 15 minutes.
It says that.
On September 7th, 2018, the temperature was 103 degrees.
Yes, ma'am.
At the time Rory collapsed, she'd been practicing for more than an hour.
Yes, ma'am.
So if you follow these guidelines, Rory should have gotten at least 4 breaks.
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, you can't tell us if you gave your team a single break on September 7th.
I can't remember.
You can't tell us if you gave Rory a single break on September 7th.
I cannot say.
So let's talk about what you had Rory do on September 7th. You watched her run Burma Road, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And before she ran Burma Road, she was participating in a scrimmage.
Yes, ma'am.
You saw that she missed some easy shots.
Yes, ma'am.
She made some bad passes.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's unusual for Rory.
Yes, ma'am.
But you didn't pull her to the side and say, Rory, what's wrong?
No, ma'am.
You didn't ask her, hey, is everything okay?
No, ma'am.
You didn't say, Rory, maybe you should grab some water.
No, ma'am.
You chose to punish her.
Yes, ma'am.
So I want to make sure we understand what this punishment looks like. You call it Burma Road.
Yes.
You use Burma Road to teach players a lesson.
Yes.
So first, the player has to sprint 90 feet.
Yes, I believe.
Then they dribble another 90 feet at top speed.
Yes, ma'am.
They shoot at an open goal.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, if they miss, they have to start over.
Yes, ma'am.
But if they score, they have to bear crawl
Yes, ma'am.
180 feet
Yes, ma'am.
on their hands and feet.
Yes, ma'am.
After the player bear crawls 180 feet, they do the whole drill again.
Yes, ma'am.
They don't stop when they're tired.
No, ma'am.
They don't stop when they're thirsty.
No, ma'am.
They don't stop after a set number of laps.
No, ma'am.
They don't stop until you tell them to stop.
Yes, ma'am.
So let's talk about when you had Rory stop on September 7th. So you saw Rory running Burma Road, right?
Yes, ma'am.
You thought she wasn't moving at her normal speed,
Yes, ma'am.
but you didn't pull Rory aside and say, Rory, what's wrong?
No, ma'am.
You didn't ask her, is everything okay?
No, ma'am.
You didn't tell her, Rory, go get some water.
No, ma'am.
You chose to impose a second type of discipline.
Yes, ma'am.
You had 15 of your players get in a line.
Yes, ma'am.
And when you blew your whistle, the first player would slide tackle Rory.
Yes, ma'am.
When you would blow your whistle after that, the next player would slide tackle Rory.
Yes, ma'am.
And you claim this wasn't a punishment, right?
No, ma'am.
You called it a drill.
Yes.
But you've never used this slide tackling to discipline your own child at practice.
Not in this way.
You've never used this slide tackling drill to discipline Aubrey Saracen in practice.
Not in this way.
You've been coaching for 20 years, right?
Yes, ma'am.
In those 20 years, you have never used this slide tackling to discipline anyone at practice.
No, ma'am. Not like this.
So the first time you chose to impose this discipline was in 103-degree heat.
Yes, ma'am.
The first time you imposed this discipline, it was on a player who had already been running and crawling Burma Road.
Yes, ma'am.
So let's talk about what happened when you used this slide tackling to discipline Rory. After the first person slide tackled Rory, you didn't stop the discipline.
No, ma'am.
You didn't stop after the second person slide tackled Rory.
No, ma'am.
You didn't stop the discipline until Rory had been tackled 15 times. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
You didn't stop the discipline until Rory had collapsed.
Yes, ma'am.
Pass the witness.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Coach Taylor, you were asked that you did not discipline Aubrey with slide tackling. Was Aubrey acting the same way as Rory?
No, Aubrey had gotten in trouble for missing an assignment, and Rory was not listening. She was distracted, and we needed to get her attention.
Excuse me. Is slide tackling a normal part of practice or normal part of soccer in general?
Yes, sir.
Does it happen in practice?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, Coach Taylor, did anyone tell you that Aubrey was using cocaine?
No.
Did anyone tell you that any of your other players were using cocaine?
No.
Were you told after the fact that Rory Street had cocaine in her system?
Afterwards, yes.
Rory Street had cocaine in her system the day she died?
Yes, sir.
Nothing further.
Any recross?
No, Your Honor.
May the witness step down, Mr.
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor. So, sorry about that.
All right. Thank you, Coach Taylor. And you can call your next witness.
Your Honor, the defense calls by deposition Jess Merriweather. May my opposing counsel read the answers as I read the questions?
Yes.
Good morning. Well, actually, let me cite court and counsel to page 2 of the Merriweather Depot, starting at line 6. Good morning. Would you please state your name for the record?
Hello there. My name is Jess Merriweather.
How old are you, Jess?
I am 28 years old.
Where do you live?
I live in Waco, Texas.
How long have you lived in Waco, Texas?
Just a couple of years now. I grew up in Houston. Then I went to Texas A&M for undergrad. And then I got a master's degree in sports training from A&M as well. And after that, I worked for a couple of years at another high school in College Station before I got the job at Waco High.
And what is your job at Waco High?
I'm an athletic trainer and I also teach health.
What is the job of an athletic trainer at a high school?
We have various teams and activities at the school that involve some type of physical activity and competition. Everything from football to soccer to volleyball.
I'd like to cite court and counsel to page 3 of the Merriweather deposition, starting with line 1.
Cheerleading and drill team. As a trainer, I work with the students that participate in those activities and keep them healthy and in shape and to treat any injuries that they have.
Page 3, line 8. How long have you been an athletic trainer?
About 2 years now.
Citing court and counsel to page 4 of the Merriweather deposition, starting with line 4. Have you worked with Coach Taylor?
I have.
In what capacity?
As a trainer. So I've attended soccer practices, soccer games where Coach Taylor was the coach. And I've worked with Coach Taylor in order to treat injured players. And I've worked with Coach Taylor just overseeing the students during practices and games.
Line 18. Do you know who Rory Street was?
Yeah, I knew Rory. Very sad what happened.
How do you know Rory?
Well, she was a varsity soccer player, so I worked with her as a trainer for the varsity soccer team, just like any other player.
Citing court and counsel to page 8, line 8. Were you at practice the day Rory died?
I was.
Did you see Rory running Burma Road?
I saw Rory over on Burma Road, but I wasn't watching her closely.
Did you see Rory during the slide tackling drill?
Again, I saw that it was happening. I certainly saw parts of it, but I didn't watch it closely.
What were you doing while all of this was going on?
I was taping another student's ankle about 40 yards away.
At the time, did you see Rory stumbling, faltering, or slowing down in any way that would have indicated she was in trouble?
No, not at all.
Was Rory sweating hard?
I mean, yes, but everyone was, including me. It was really hot.
Page 9, line 1 and 2. Did Rory ever say anything to you about feeling bad that day?
Nope, never said anything to me. Here's the thing. I'm there to take care of the players, and they know it. I'm kind of a combination trainer and guardian to the team. So they trust me, and I trust them to tell me if something is wrong or if they're hurting. Rory didn't say a word.
Line 9. Are players allowed to get water when they want it?
Yes, all they have to do is ask, even if we're not on a water break.
That's the witness, Your Honor.
Plaintiff counsel, any cross?
No, Your Honor.
Anything further from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, defense offers Exhibit 15 into evidence. Exhibit 15, per your pretrial order, Rule 3, states that it is stipulated authentic. Furthermore, this meets the exception of hearsay. It's a toxicology report of Rory on the day that she died, and it is not hearsay under 8038 as it is a public record.
Any response?
Your Honor, we have no objections.
Exhibit, you said it was 15.
15, Your Honor.
Exhibit 15 will be admitted.
Then at this time, the defense rests and would like to re-raise our motion and our judgment as a matter of law.
Your judgment as a matter of law will be denied. Plaintiff's counsel, anything else from you?
No, Your Honor.
Very well, then we will move on to closing argument. I'm going to do a time check, and y'all can quickly grab some water, prepare your thoughts, and we'll get back here as soon as I'm done with the time.
Thank you.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. So plaintiff's counsel, you have 18 minutes and 31 seconds. Defense counsel, you have 20:45. Are both parties ready to proceed to closing argument?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Mr. Tully, you have the floor.
May I proceed?
You may.
The defendant you met today was sympathetic, thoughtful, compassionate. But the defendant who took the stand today was not the same defendant on the practice field on September 7th, 2018. Today, the defendant said, "I love my players like they're my own kids." But that day, take your sorry butt to Burma Road. You are useless. Today, she said, safety first. Safety is my top priority. But that hot September day, you're gonna run until you pass out. Today on trial, I want my students to reach their full potential. But in practice, she grabbed a student by her shirt, yanked her to her feet, just so she could be knocked down again. The defendant didn't stop when Rory was struggling to move. The defendant didn't stop when Rory was struggling to breathe, didn't stop when Rory was struggling to stand. She didn't stop until Rory Street was dead. As the plaintiff, we had the burden. We had the burden to prove it's more likely than not that the defendant's negligence caused Rory to die. And we met that burden with 3 simple facts. Number 1, the defendant used extreme disciplinary methods that put every child at risk. She had her students practicing in 103-degree heat. Most of us don't want to go outside when it's that hot. She had her students practicing for hours in that heat, running, sprinting, tackling in that heat. The High School Soccer Coaches Association told the defendant, when it's over 100 degrees out, you must have breaks every 15 minutes.
Your Honor, objection.
Yes.
Respectfully, this was taken up when I objected about this evidence being used substantively. Opposing counsel said they were not using it for its truth purpose and instead for knowledge. They are arguing it substantively here in closing argument.
Response?
Your Honor, we're actually not arguing this for its truth. In fact, my statement was just that the defendant was told this, and that's exactly my response in trial. We're using this for knowledge, which goes to the reasonableness of the defendant's actions, directly to the first element of our claim.
Overruled.
The High School Soccer Coaches Association told the defendant, when it's over 100 degrees out, you must have breaks every 15 minutes. Not a recommended, not could, not should, must. Yet not a single witness could remember the defendant giving these kids a water break. I asked the defendant, you can't tell us if you gave Rory a single break on September 7th. Her answer? I can't. And the defendant didn't just use those conditions for practice. She used them for punishment. Burma Road. Sprint 90 feet. Sprint another 90 feet while dribbling. Take a shot on goal. And if you miss, your penalty is starting over. But if you make it, your reward is crawling. 180 feet on all fours, no shade, no water, no breaks. Congratulations. The defendant tried to tell you this was all about conditioning, about pushing teenagers to be their best. No, this was not about conditioning. This was about the defendant putting competition above caution, about putting herself above her students. She'd won the district, she'd won the region, but in 26 years, she had never won the Texas State Championship. And you know what they say, ain't no points for second place. The defendant wanted to win so badly, she put her players at risk. Which brings me to fact number 2. The defendant put Rory Street in danger. The defense spent a lot of time telling you that Burma Road wasn't a big deal. It's a tradition. We've done it for decades and no one has ever been hurt. Okay. But what about the tackling drill? That tradition started on September 7th, 2018. The defendant admitted in her 26 years of coaching, she has never subjected any student to that tackling line. Not her worst players, not her best, not her child, not anyone except Rory Street. And the defense tried to tell you, well, slide tackles, they're part of the game. But this wasn't slide tackle practice because it wasn't practice. It was violence. Organized, deliberate violence. The coach, the person in charge of these children, told the team to take turns knocking Rory to the ground. 1, do it again. 2, again. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, again, until it was 15 times. The defendant didn't stop until Rory Street was dead. Fact number 3. The defendant ignored the warning signs. If the defendant had done this to a player who looked healthy, it would have been horrendous. But when she did it to a player who was so obviously struggling, it became downright unspeakable. Pale, lifeless, hands on her hips, breathing heavily. That's how Aubrey Saracen described Rory before the defendant had 15 athletes treat her like a punching bag. The defendant tried to tell you that Aubrey Saracen was on Burma Road. She wasn't on the field. Exactly. Even from Burma Road, it was obvious Rory was struggling. And the defense said, Aubrey Saracen is biased. The coach made her share her starting spot. But which eyewitness is more biased? The college student who lost some playing time 2 years ago? Or the defendant who faces a wrongful death lawsuit today? And whose account makes more sense? The defendant who would have you believe that a star athlete looked fine, until suddenly she kneeled over and died? Or the teammate who watched helplessly at Rory get worse and worse until it was too late? Let's take a look at the verdict form. We had to prove negligence, lack of ordinary care. Ordinary care would be following the rules created by the High School Coaches Association. Ordinary care would be not doing Burma Road when it's 103 degrees out. Ordinary care would be protecting the kid who is struggling, not pummeling her. The defendant was negligent. Now, the defense tried to say the defendant wasn't negligent because she didn't know Rory had cocaine in her system. But the defense has a problem, because the symptoms of heat stroke involving cocaine are the same as the symptoms for heat stroke by anything else. And you don't have to take my word for it. Exhibit 16, our expert's report. Exhibit 18, the defense's expert report. The symptoms of heat stroke caused by cocaine are the same as the symptoms for heat stroke caused by anything else. Those signs were in front of the defendant's face. and the defendant didn't stop pushing Rory Street. That's negligence. The only other element we had to prove was causation. Exhibit 14. The autopsy says Rory died from cardiac arrest. Exhibit 16. Dr. McConaughey says that Rory's cardiac arrest was caused by heat stroke. When a person's body overheats so much, their heart just gives out. So what could have caused Rory's body to overheat? This was an 18-year-old star athlete in peak physical condition. She had an amount of cocaine that even the defense admits was nominal. We can say more likely than not that the cause of this heat stroke was running, sprinting, crawling, standing again and again, nonstop for more than an hour in 103-degree heat. More likely than not that the defendant's negligence caused Rory's death. Now, the defense says that Rory caused her own death. And here, the defense has the burden of proof. They have to prove that it's more likely than not that Rory's decision to use cocaine caused or contributed to her death. And this comes down to a battle of the experts. Their expert says it was cocaine. Ours says it wasn't. So let's consider the credentials. Their expert has a bachelor's in toxicology. Ours has a medical degree from Baylor. Their expert is a toxicologist whose CV doesn't even mention lab work. Our expert is the chief of cardiology at McClellan Memorial. Their expert travels around the country working with lawyers. Our expert stays here in Waco working with doctors. The defense's case requires a comparison of the experts, but there's no comparison. The defense has failed to meet their burden. And that's it. If you conclude that it's more likely than not that we met our burden of proof and that the defense didn't, you're done after question 1. But I don't want to be presumptuous. If you reach question 2, if you think both the defendant and Rory bear some responsibility, question 2 asks you to divide the responsibility between them. Here, we ask you to think about who each person was. One of them was a teenager who spent hours of their life following the instructions of her coach. One was an adult who decides everything from when her students go home to when they get water. The party who bears the responsibility for the tragedy of September 7th is the person who was supposed to be responsible on September 7th. Rory Street was just 18 years old. She had her whole life in front of her. And what makes her death even more painful is that it could have been easily prevented. All the defendant had to do was stop the abuse. But the defendant didn't stop when Rory was struggling in 103-degree heat. Didn't stop when Rory could no longer stand on her own. Didn't stop when Rory had been knocked down once, twice, 15 times. Didn't stop. until Rory's heart had stopped. We ask you to find the defendant liable because she didn't stop until Rory was dead. Thank you.
Defense closing.
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court. This has been a difficult case. I'm not going to stand here and pretend that I understand what it feels like to lose a child. But in cases like this, it is natural to want to look for someone else to blame. And that is often because the truth is painfully hard to accept. The hard truth in this case, Your Honor, is that Rory Street was using cocaine. And Rory Street's cocaine use is what caused her death, not Coach Taylor. And we were the first to admit that Coach Taylor was a hard coach, that she had high expectations, that she wanted her players to be disciplined, hardworking, and selfless, to put the team first. We also showed you through her testimony that she considered each one of her players to be like her kids, and that's why she had expectations like that. She wanted to see them succeed at the next level. So when she saw players goofing off like Rory was on that day, she wanted to try to get their attention, to get their focus, to get them back on track, which is why Rory was at Burma Road to begin with. Now, what Coach Taylor did not know, what nobody on that team knew, was that Rory was using cocaine that day. Now, the plaintiff has brought this claim for wrongful death, and it is the plaintiff's burden to prove. The plaintiff had the burden of proving by preponderance of evidence today that Coach Taylor failed to exercise reasonable care, that Coach Taylor's actions were the proximate cause of Rory Street's death. But I want to show you why they failed to meet that burden, and I want to show you why they failed to prove Coach Taylor failed to exercise reasonable care. Andrew, will you put the slide for us? Now, opposing counsel brought up the association guidelines and talked about her 3 points. And I want to talk about each one of these guidelines and in detail and how it intertwines with her points. First, let's start with practicing 2 hours. The guidelines say you should not practice more than 2 hours. We've heard no evidence today that suggested that practice went longer than 2 hours. Aubrey Saracen only gave the testimony that they were practicing for 1 hour and 15 minutes. We don't actually know when that practice stopped. There is no concrete evidence to suggest that that practice went on more than 2 hours. Then we look at the next one. A break every 15 minutes. Ms. Jess Merriweather told us in her testimony that the players were able to take breaks anytime they wanted. Anytime they needed water, all they had to do was ask. Breaks were provided. And as I mentioned, water. Jess said the same thing. She said if a player was thirsty or dehydrated or needed water, all they had to do was ask. And Aubrey Saracen admitted that water was on the field that day. Now, in terms of this last point about shade, nowhere in those guidelines does it say shade has to be used. Shade was not a must. Then we will look at the drills. Burma Road. Your Honor, Burma Road is a red herring. Burma Road has been in place for over 35 years. Coach Taylor did not start Burma Road, and we heard no evidence today to suggest that Burma Road had caused harm physically to anyone in the past 35 years. Then we look at the slide tackle drill, which is the crux of the plaintiff's case. The slide tackle drill is something that has to be taught. It's what those guidelines the plaintiff talked about preaches that coaches need to teach their players. It's how they keep themselves from getting hurt. Slide tackles are a normal course of soccer. That's how people play defense. It's how they take the ball and go back on offense, and the coach would be irresponsible not to teach their players how to avoid a slide tackle. Even Aubrey Saracen admitted that they're not usually dangerous. That's how you know the plaintiff has failed to prove that the defendant failed to use ordinary care. So then we go to the next element of their burden. We go to proximate cause and foreseeability. It says explicitly that the plaintiff had to prove that a person using ordinary care would have foreseen, could have predicted Rory's death might reasonably result from running those drills. Your Honor, in 35 years, we heard no evidence on the plaintiff side, defense side, anywhere that someone has died as a result of either a slide tackle or from the Burma Road. That instruction means that Coach Taylor would have had to foresee, would have had to predict further that his star athlete was going to come to practice that day high on cocaine. Not Coach Taylor, not the medical assistant, not her teammates, not her own mom. Nobody in the world could have imagined that Rory Street, the star athlete of Waco, Texas, was going to be on cocaine. Which leads us to our affirmative defense, Your Honor. Because we have brought this claim of comparative negligence, we have the burden to prove it to you. And in doing so, we furnish the report of Mr. Spencer London. I'm going to pull that report up in front of me. Andrew, will you pull up on that toxicology report the findings on the third row? Now, Mr. London, he reviewed all the depositions, he reviewed the toxicology report, he reviewed the autopsy report, and that autopsy report specifically found that Rory had 60 nanograms of cocaine in her system. And Mr. London told us that some people might not find that number to be significant. That people might think that might have not had an effect on her that day. But when we look at the evidence and the time that went by, it had been hours since practice that autopsy report was done. Rory had been sweating all day. There is no definitive way to tell just how much cocaine was in her system at the time of practice and preceding. Mr. Lennon tells us why cocaine in her system is important. Andrew, will you pull up Mr. London's report for us, please? As you'll see in this report, Mr. London states that cocaine usage can ultimately lead to cardiac arrhythmia, heat strokes, and heart failure. Excuse me, I misspoke. Heart attacks, stroke, and heart failure. He states that cocaine usage can lower the threshold for overheating. And he states that Rory's heart showed signs consistent with cocaine usage. Andrew, will you highlight all that for us, please? Now, the plaintiff's expert has taken an alternative theory of liability, has said that instead this was caused by heat stroke and not cocaine usage. Mr. Lennon offers guidance on that opinion and why it's incorrect. I'm going to read this word for word. Dr. McConaughey describes the following symptoms for Rory Street on the day in question: struggling, unusually pale, feeling funny, complained of chest pain, hands on her hips, breathing heavy, groaning, twitching, and convulsing. Many of these symptoms are consistent with cocaine use. Andrew, will you highlight that for us, please? Mr. Gordon. And Mr. Lennon goes on to say that Rory complained of chest pain, feeling funny, which could be related to any number of the symptoms of cocaine use, groaning, which could be related to nausea, and convulsing, twitching on the ground. Again, all of these symptoms are consistent with cocaine use. Your Honor, nobody in Waco, Texas, at Waco High School would have predicted that their star athlete was using cocaine. Just like when the Boston Celtics drafted their #1 pick, Len Bias, at 19 years old, nobody would have predicted that he would have dropped dead on the basketball court at 19 years old. Cases like this are hard to reconcile. When you have a hard truth, it's difficult to digest. Your Honor, the hard truth in this case is that Rory was using cocaine, and that her cocaine is what led to her death, not Coach Taylor's conduct. Fine for Coach Taylor.
Plaintiff, did you have a rebuttal argument? I can't hear you. I think you might be muted.
Your Honor, can you hear me now?
There you are. You have 1 minute and 57 seconds remaining in your time.
Will do. The defense started their opening statement today by saying that this is a hard case, that it's a tragedy, and that their hearts go out to the streets. But if the defendant had cared half as much as their attorneys do today, maybe Rory wouldn't have died. Maybe she'd still be alive. Now, the defense wants you to think that slide tackles are just a part of the game. But being slide tackled 15 times in a row, that's not part of the game. Yanking a student to their feet when they can't stand up so they can be tackled again, that's not part of the game. A coach who is supposed to be caring for a kid and having them pummeled over and over again is not part of the game. The defense made a big deal about the cocaine in today's case. But you don't have to trust my opinion on the significance of the cocaine. Trust the experts. Both experts agree that it was a nominal amount of cocaine found in Rory's system. Both experts agree that even if the heat stroke was made worse by the cocaine, the symptoms of heat stroke are the same. They would have been visible. And Coach Taylor saw those symptoms and had Rory tackled 15 times anyway. We ask you to find the defendant liable because she didn't stop until Rory Street was dead. Thank you.
All right. First of all, well done to both competitors. Y'all did an excellent job. Judges, if y'all would fill out your ballots and submit them, I will go and check. And when I have all of your ballots submitted in, I will come back and then release everyone from the room. So if all the competitors and all of the judges will stay here, I'll come back and release you shortly.